Of our hearts be acceptable to thee, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So I know you're probably not counting, but this Sunday's gospel is the 5th Sunday in a row that we have heard of Jesus being the bread of life. Each gospel has been different. They've all been from chapter 6 of John's gospel, and each one has had a different theme. This one has a wrap-up, so to speak, kind of summarizing what we learned about Jesus being the bread, and then it takes a very dark shift towards the cross, and I'll help you to see that shift, hopefully. Sometimes John has a way of washing over us, and we know this is John again. We heard this last week. Jesus is the bread, Jesus is the life. Yeah, we know that, right? But there is something that's very important being stressed this time. So Jesus summarizes that he is the manna that comes down from heaven in the present tense. He exaggerates the fact that this is manna that is present right now for everyone. It is up to those who believe to be able to receive the manna, but that he is offering it every day. Unlike the manna in the wilderness, which appeared for the people who were lost in the wilderness for 40 years. Moses was leading them. The qualities of this being wandering around in the desert were that they were starving and they were thirsty. And with Moses being the speaker for them, there appeared manna in the morning. Every day they'd get up and they'd take this stuff off the leaves of the bushes and they would eat it. It wasn't very tasty, and they complained about that. The word in Hebrew for manna is manhu, or manhu, and you can see how it became manna, and it literally means, what is it? So they got up every morning and they ate, what is it? And when they were thirsty, Moses would tap on the rock and water would gush from the rock. They also had quails appear that got a little protein. When Jesus fed the thousands at Capernaum, what else appeared besides the bread in the basket? But there was meat in there. Remember, there was fish. So just like the people wandering in the desert, there's a little protein, there's fish, there's bread, and there's wine flowing in plenty. But Jesus says, unlike those in the desert who received the manna, they had a relationship with God, but every single one of them died. And you are not going to go the route that they went, because what I offer you is eternal life. That's hard to get your head around, and that's why some of the people leave him. But when he said, and this was last week's gospel, I am the body and I am the blood, but he says, eat my flesh and drink my blood, sounding very much like a cannibal. Shocking language, and it does shock them. We're not sure if that's what troubles some of the people who left, but if you notice, what shifts in this story is that he was talking to the crowd, reminding them that he is the bread which continues to give, and if you receive this bread, you will live forever. Then the crowd leaves, and the ones who are left are his disciples. And it is a group of those disciples who turn away from him. You know, turning in Bible language means that you're converted. So when they turn towards Jesus, they belong to him. When they turn away from him, they're like kicking the dust at him and leaving him. So it's an abrupt departure. And this is quite foreboding. It doesn't bode well. So he then asked the disciples, you think it's risky to eat this bread? Well, guess what is in store? You will see the Son of Man ascend into heaven. So he's talking about the ascension. In order for there to be an ascension, there has to be a resurrection. If we think getting our head around Jesus being the bread and the bread and the wine, being the flesh and the blood, if that's hard, how in the world are we going to get our heads around resurrection and ascension into heaven? But he reminds them that part of being one of the group of people around an abiding, a nesting, so that we live within God and God lives within us. So Jesus says, this bread and this wine that is me that I give you is what enables this abiding business, where we live within Jesus and Jesus lives within us. And we use this abiding language when we receive Eucharist, that it's not just the moment that we receive Jesus, it is carrying him with us in our hearts and extending into the world. So, the disciples who turn back, this is the only gospel that says some disciples turn away from him. But it's a foreboding of all the other disciples. They all leave him at the end too, remember? So everyone leaves him. If you turn back, are you welcomed back to Jesus? Well, all of us do, because we all mess up. We all turn away from Jesus. We don't do it on purpose. But the minute we go back outside and into our cars and end up on Route 9, some of our behavior indicates that we're not centered in God. It just happens. And like the Hebrews who would wake up in the morning and think, oh God, another day of what is it? Manna. We look at our lives sometimes without any light to shine on it. We think, how am I going to get through this day? It's hot again. Air conditioner's broken. I have no groceries in the pantry. Some days are just terribly hard to get through. What we have is a community that, because of all of us in this community, one of us at one time or another is feeling the love of Christ in his or her heart and can go visit those who are not feeling it in the hospital, not feeling it in the rest home, not feeling it in line at the food pantry. It is up to the community, and that's why all of these sayings about Jesus being the bread and the wine, they're all about receiving him in community and recognizing that each one of us is a shining example of Christ, completely different from the person sitting next to you. We all have different gifts. We all have different interpretations. All of those gifts and all of those interpretations, and every single person is welcome at this altar. Right? Everyone receives the gift. And that's the difference between the manna in the desert, that got them through a hard period and then it disappeared. Jesus is the bread that just keeps giving. He is the Spirit that keeps giving. And the Spirit makes an entrance in this gospel today too. This is the first time we hear of the Spirit. That the flesh dies, just like the manna. It's gone. But the Spirit lives forever, and it's the Spirit that gets us communicating with each other and reaching out to those who aren't feeling it at the moment. So we pray that we continue to shine for others, often when we cannot even see it ourselves.